Hello, my name is Naya Cruz, and I will be reading you The Tales of the Peculiar by Ransom Riggs. Tales of Cuthbert. This is the Tales of Cuthbert. Once upon a peculiar time, in a forest deep and ancient, there roamed a great many animals. There were rabbits and deers and foxes, just as there in every forest, but there were animals of a less common sort too, like stilt-legged grim bears and two-headed lynxes and talking emu-raffs. These peculiar animals were a favorite target of hunters, who loved to shoot them and mount them on the walls and show them off to their hunter friends, but loved even more to sell them off to zookeepers, who would lock them in cages and charge money to view them. Now, you think it would be far better to be locked in a cage than to be shot and mounted on a wall, but peculiar creatures must roam free to be happy, and after a while the spirits of caged ones wither, and they begin to envy their wall-mounted friends. This was an age when giants still roamed the earth as they did in the long ago olden times, though they were few in number and diminishing, and it just so happened that one of these giants lived near the forest, and he was very kind and spoke very softly and ate only plants. That is to say, giants disappeared altogether. They simply stopped walking the earth. Read the Cocobolo to learn what became of them. But that is a story for another time. His name was Cuthbert. One day, Cuthbert came into the forest to gather berries, and there saw a hunter hunting an emu-raff. Being the kindly giant he was, Cuthbert picked up the little raff by the scruff of its long neck, and standing up to its full height on tiptoe, which he barely did because it made all his bones crackle, Cuthbert was able to reach up very high and deposit emu-raff on a mountain-top, well out of danger. Then, just for good measure, he squashed the hunter to jelly between his toes. Word of Cuthbert's kindness spread throughout the forest, and soon peculiar animals were coming to him every day asking to be lifted up to the mountain-top and out of danger. And Cuthbert said, "I'll protect you, little brothers and sisters. All I ask in return is that you talk to me and keep me company. There aren't many giants left in the world, and I get lonely from time to time." And they said, "We will, Cuthbert, we will." So every day, Cuthbert saved more peculiar animals from the hunters, lifting them up to the mountain by the scruffs of their necks, until there was a whole peculiar menagerie up there. And the animals were happy there, because they could finally live in peace. And Cuthbert was happy too, because he stood on his tiptoes and rested his chin on the top of the mountain. He could talk to his new friends all he liked. Then one morning, a witch came to see Cuthbert. The giant was bathing in a little lake in the shadow of the mountain when she said to him, "I'm terribly sorry, but I've got to turn you into stone." "Why would you do that?" asked the giant. "I'm very a helping sort of giant." And she said, "I was hired by the family of the hunter you squashed." "Ah," he replied, "forgot about him." "Terribly sorry," the witch said again, and then she waved a little birch branch at him, and poor Cuthbert was turned into stone. All of a sudden, Cuthbert became very heavy, so heavy that he began to sink in the lake. He sank and didn't stop sinking until he was covered in water all the way up to his neck. His animal friends saw what was happening, and though they felt terrible about it, they decided they could do nothing to help him. "I know you can't save me," Cuthbert shouted up to his friends, "but at least come and talk to me. I'm stuck down here, and so very lonely." "But if we come down there, the hunters will shoot us," they called back. Cuthbert knew they were right, but still he pleaded with them. talk to me," he cried. "Please, come and talk to me." The animals tried singing and shouting to both Cuthbert from the safety of the cliff top, but they were far too distant and the voices were too small, so that even Cuthbert and his giant ears, they sounded quieter than the whisper of leaves in the wind. "Talk to me," he begged. "Come and talk to me." But they never did. And he was still crying when his throat turned to stone like the rest of him. Editor's note: that is, historically, where the tale ends. However, it is so terribly sad, so lacking in useful and moral lessons, and so known for leaving listeners in tears, that it's become a tradition among tellers to improvise new and less dire conclusions. I've taken the liberty here of writing my own. Signed by Middle Nullings. The animals tried singing and shouting to both Cuthbert from the safety of their cliff top, but they were too distant and their voices too small, so that even to Cuthbert and his giant ears they sounded quieter than the whisper of leaves in the wind. "Talk to me," he begged. "Come and talk to me." After a while, the animals began to feel very bad, especially the emiraf. "Oh, for goodness' sake," he said. "All he wants is some company. Is that so much to ask?" "I dare say it is," said the grim bear. "It is dangerous down there, and with Cuthbert torn to stone, how will we get back up to the safety of our cliff top?" "There is nothing that can be done for him," said the two-headed lynx, "unless you know how to reverse a witch's curse." "Of course I don't," said the emiraf, "but that doesn't matter. We're all going to die one day, and perhaps today it's Cuthbert's turn. But we mustn't let him die alone. I won't be able to live with myself." It was more guilt than the other animals could hear, and soon they had all decided to join the emiraf despite the dangers that faced them on the ground. Led by the raft, they made a ladder of their bodies, linking hands to ankles, and climbed down the cliff face to the ground. How would they ever get back to safety again was a question for another time. They ran to Cuthbert and soon forded him, and the giant wept with gratitude, even while he was turning to stone. As they talked to him, his voice grew quieter and quieter, his lips and throat petrifying until they could hardly move. Finally, he became so quiet and still that the animals wondered if he had died. The emiraf pressed his head against Cuthbert's chest. After a moment, he said, "I can still his heart beating." The wren, who would turn into a human, perched on the rim of Cuthbert's ear and said, "Friend, can you hear us?" And from his stony throat they heard, no louder than a puff of breeze, "Yes, friends." They broke into a cheer. Cuthbert was still alive inside of his skin of stone, and so he remained. The witch's curse had been strong, but not strong enough to petrify him through and through. The animals were now poor Cuthbert's caretakers, as he had once been theirs. They kept him company, gathered food, and dropped it into his open mouth, and talked to him all day long. Responses became more rare, and they knew that he was alive from the beating of his heart. And though the wingless among them had no way to reach the safety of the cliff top, Cuthbert kept them safe another way. They slept inside his mouth at night, and if ever hunters came along, they would climb down his throat and make howling noises that terrified the humans. Cuthbert became their home and their refuge. Even though he could not move a single muscle, he was happy as he could be. Many years later, Cuthbert's heart finally stopped beating. He died peacefully, surrounded by his friends, a happy giant. The wren, who had grown up to be a rimbin, decided they had become too numerous to continue living inside the stone giant. So she brought all the peculiar animals to a time loop she had made atop of the cliff. They had reached the cliff top via an ingenious rope and pulley system Miss Wren engineered herself. She put the entrance to the loop inside Cuthbert. That way he would never be forgotten, and every coming or going was a chance to say hello to their old friend. And whenever she or any of the animals passed through Cuthbert, they patted him on the shoulder and said, "Hello, friend," as if they stopped and listened carefully, and if the wind was blowing just right, it almost sounded like hello. And that is the end of the tale of Cuthbert. Good night.